Hello everyone, welcome back to the Anatomy Lab. Today we're going to be taking a look at the foramen of the skull, and in this case we're going to be looking at the posterior portion of the skull instead. So if you haven't already, I would definitely look at the anterior region first so you can get yourself oriented to everything else. But now we're going to be taking a look at the posterior foramina back here. So one foramen in particular is going to help with kind of giving us some position to another foramen that we'll look at right now. That's the foramen lacerum. So if you recall from last time, you had the foramen lacerum that is right next to the sella turcica, and it's this big old hole right here. And you know that this is foramen lacerum because number one, it's a big hole, but secondly, it is not going to be next to a foramen spinosum. So foramen lacerum, very medial, very large, no foramen spinosum. But right next to the foramen lacerum, you're actually going to have a canal that is going to be moving posteriorly through the temporal bone. So along the anterior region of the petrous portion of the temporal bone, this is going to be the carotid canal. So the carotid canal is actually going to be going at a slant, meaning that although it looks like it's very close to the foramen lacerum here, it is going to end up very far away from the foramen lacerum on the other side. So let's use the pipe cleaners to help with indicating that really quickly as well. So if we look here, this is the carotid canal. And then if we go through the foramen lacerum as well, we can see that they are right next to each other. They are very close to each other in this view, with foramen lacerum and carotid canal pretty much almost connected. Like you can see there's just this small little portion that's dividing the two. But if you look on this view, now they're a little bit farther apart. Carotid canal has traveled a little bit farther away, meaning that the foramen lacerum that you can see like straight through, like this, is going to be easier to find, while the carotid canal, you cannot really see through it very well. It's just going to be kind of it's going to be a hole that kind of ends here. But we're going to see that there are some other foramina that will help with indicating which one will be the carotid canal. So just for now, remember, like foramen lacerum is going to be close to it from the superior view, but farther away from the inferior view. Now, in addition to the carotid canal, there's a couple of other foramina that you'll see here as well. So back here, this is going to be called the internal acoustic meatus. So along the posterior side of the petrous region, this is called the internal acoustic meatus. So the internal acoustic meatus is going to lead to the inner ear, like the portion where you see like the cochlea, as well as the vestibule and semicircular canals for hearing, as well as balance. But the internal acoustic meatus is going to be where the nerve goes through in order for it to reach it. But the most important part right here is petrous region, posterior internal acoustic meatus. Now, although not part of the temporal bone, very closely related to it because it's actually between the temporal and the occipital bone, you have this large hole right here. This large hole is called the jugular foramen. And this is a very large hole, which is a very good indicator of where it should be, but furthermore, it kind of has like a B shape. Like it might look like a little kind of outline of a B, or maybe a jelly bean. So jugular foramen, also posterior to the petrous region between the temporal bone and the occipital bone. Now, the biggest of the holes like that you're gonna like see here is the foramen magnum. So between those two words, foramen means hole, magnum means big, and you may know magnum from some other reference in your life out there, whether personally or not, but magnum means big. So foramen magnum means the big hole, and this is where the brainstem as well as the spinal cord are going to be able to connect through. So foramen magnum, it is going to be the medulla, you're going to have the brainstem, the medulla oblongata, going through it to connect with the spinal cord. But there's another hole that you can actually see here as well. This hole is going to be right here. So I'm going to show you from another view as well, but this right here is called the hypoglossal canals. Now, what we'll see is that on the other side of the skull, these foramina may look a little bit different. So to start off with, let's go a little bit backwards, starting off with the hypoglossal canals. So here's the foramen magnum, and these two are called the occipital condyles. So the occipital condyles are going to be at the 10 and 2 positions along the foramen magnum, and going through the occipital condyles, you're going to have that hole. You're going to have this hole going through it, which is the hypoglossal canal. So you can see that little wooden stick. This is the hypoglossal canal going through the occipital condyle. So also at the 10 and 2 positions, this is the hypoglossal canal. And remember, that was the same thing that we looked at here. It's just that it's a little bit hard to see from this view and a little easier to see from this view. Now furthermore, right next to the hypoglossal canal, you also have the jugular foramen, which is that B-shaped or bean or jelly bean shaped hole, but also the carotid canal. So that might not seem super intuitive, but remember, the carotid canal is going to be traveling some distance. It is going to be moving from next to the foramen lacerum through like temporal mountain in order for it to get to its best friend, the jugular foramen. So let's show this one more time using the pipe cleaners in this case. So between the jugular foramen and the carotid canal, they may not be very close from the superior view, but they're going to be best friends from the inferior view. So you can see carotid canal, orange, jugular foramen, pink, pretty far away from each other. But if we look from this view, there you go. They're right next to each other. So what you'll want to do is use something to reference to another, as in like, look for something that you know really well. I can find the jugular foramen pretty consistently because it's so big and it's very apparent, but the carotid canal is a little bit harder. So this would be the jugular foramen, something that I can find pretty easily. If I can find the jugular foramen right next to it, I'll know that this is the carotid canal. But even to add on to that, there's one more hole that you can see here as well, which would be the hypoglossal canal. So I would even add that furthermore to make sure that everything is completely clear. Like, there are 3 holes in very close proximity here, and it would be very hard to distinguish between them without some sort of reference point. So you can use the jugular foramen in the middle, hypoglossal canal right next to it, going through the occipital condyles, and then on the other side, carotid canal. And furthermore, if you wanted to start from here, like the foramen magnum, I would start with the foramen magnum, go through the hypoglossal canal, get to the jugular foramen, and then lastly, you have the carotid canal here. So you really need to have some sort of reference point to make sure that you can identify everything correctly and confidently. Otherwise, it is going to be very hard to kind of differentiate between all of these very similar looking holes. So as long as you have something, like whatever works for you is going to be fine, but this was honestly the way that I used in order for me to learn it effectively. So with that said, I think that's about it for now. So good luck with your study. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all next time.